So what I will present to you is the position of repair of the PRA in repair, the strategy of the pilot regeneration action, the spin-off projects being developed, the funding strategy being developed and discussed with the managing authorities, the implementation planning based on the Ascent management model, and some conclusions. Position of PRA in repair. Of course, we started with the repair main objective to use these sites, military sites, as a catalyst for broader urban development, which was the main aim of repair. In phase 2, we had this, to remind you, and also for some people who are new in this process, we had our pillar debates on the 4 pillars, which you are all aware of: preservation or conservation, Malcolm, for you. Transport, energy, and jobs. And then we had our local action plans, which have been developed based on the input given from the partners and from partner to partner as a real, truly transfer of know-how and experience, and which was reflected in all the local action plans. Fourthly, and now we come to the PRAs, we decided, let's say this group decided to select 2 sites, being Florence and Paola. I'll come back to that later, what the, let's say, reasons were to select these 2 sites as a PRA, pilot regeneration action. In that period, there was also a knowledge transfer process organized between the partners. So the first draft implementation plan was being presented in Florence. Partners came together and they discussed it, and it was an opportunity for the partners to be aware of what the, let's say, draft content of the implementation plan was, and they could have, they will have used it for their own local action planning implementation. And as a 5th phase, of course, we have the final recommendations, in which some of the PRA conclusions were included, or will be included. And this is the arrow which shows how the process looked like. Then the objectives of the PRA. The first objective was to provide assistance in preparing and realizing the local action plan. The second one was to facilitate the process of planning and assessing EU funds, and then with a strong focus on ERDF funding. The third one was to test the correlation and relevance to the 4 repair pillars, which has been done. And the fourth one was to the leverage of experience and knowledge between partners. Then we come to the process of selection of the PRAs. There were basically 3 criteria used. In general, there were more criteria, but let's say the general criteria were based on upon the stage of development of a PRA. It made sense, of course, to maximize this transfer of experience and knowledge process, to choose locations which were in a certain stage of development already, and they should have not started from scratch. And that's why something strange is happening now. Oh, okay. Keep talking. The second one was based upon the capacities of the 2 selected sites, also to transfer their know-how to the others, which is very important, of course. And the third one was based upon the chances of a real implementation from the recommendations being prepared by the partners. This was the reason why we selected these 2 sites. And I could say, based on my own experience, that you made a good choice. Okay, sorry. Then the benefits of being a PRA, basically three general ones. You get some targeted assistance of experts to bridge basically this phase of local action planning, which is beautiful, but planning without a real implementation focus is a waste of time. So that's why this targeted assistance of experts was very useful, I think. We had a gathered knowledge of all partners. This was done basically in Florence, where we had this coordination workshop. And it was a real spin-off to the other partners not being a PRA, although I come back to this topic later on in my conclusions. So the question is, what is the niche of a pilot regeneration action? I think it was a good way to test a practical testing of policies. We discussed intensively policies in our workshops, but you cannot live in policies, I think. So you need to test them on the ground. Are they workable or not? And this is what we tried to do in the PRA as well. And you can read that, of course, in this extensive report, which is on the website. We try to bridge existing policies, the labs, and future implementation actions. I think it could be a niche that EU policies feeding into daily practice using this PRA method, which has been done in the PRAs. And it's a practical testing of policies using PRA leads to an update of the final recommendations, because we could have defined recommendations in the following the pillars. We could have developed these local action plans, but based on the fact that we could test it on the ground, it leads to a real practical use of the recommendations, hopefully in the future. And it gave some clear views on funding opportunities, and it created some kind of commitment between the partners and the managing authority. This commitment was a bit stronger in Paola compared to Florence, but this was basically because in Florence, let's say, all the competitiveness money was basically committed. So, but they were really enthusiastic about this approach, and I think for Florence as well, for the next funding period, you have a good start, a good basis. And that's what was confirmed as well by the managing authority, by the way. So what was the main process of the PRA? So we started with reviewing the two labs of both partners. We defined some recommendations which were included in the labs. Then we defined the PRA strategy, which was basically composed of three main parts as well. The funding opportunities, the next steps, let's say, at the spin-off projects, and next steps for future implementation. Then we discussed the strategy with the managing authority, with the local support groups, and with the repair working group in Florence. And as a final fourth step, we used the Ascent management model for defining the implementation plan. So that has been done. And again, the arrow that it's an integrated, connected approach. The main process of the PRA, 8 steps. As I mentioned before, analyzing the labs, recommendations, 2 site visits, meetings with local support groups and managing authorities, PRA strategy definition, transfer of selected good practices, definition of spin-off projects, and funding strategy, which was both the case in the PRAs, in the 2 PRAs selected. Then funding, some, I think, possibly open doors, but it is quite important that always choose the right program, because that's not obvious all the time that it's the case. So, for example, just to give you an example, if you would apply for some funding in an transnational program with some small-scale investments, but you submit a project, for example, on to boost recreational activities of to be developed in a military site, and you notice that within this program there's no real opportunity for funding. But if you notice that, hey, if we would include some sustainable energy measures in our approach, then it could be quite interesting for this program to do it like that. And so sometimes it's needed to have this very detailed and tailored, let's say, grant engineering approach, which makes your let's say, results much greater and more successful. And of course, finding the right partners, that's very important, that you really can use and transfer the knowledge of your partners in the project you are developing, and enhance the eligibility and chances of success by, as I put it, this engineering approach. Then the detailed implementation plan, as being said already by me, it's inspired by the Ascent 3C project. So that was very good because every party could use it. So it was we didn't have to discuss that anymore. So that was very useful. Important for future funding requests, and it's a tool to implement the labs and the pilots based on the labs. So what are the most important aspects of the implementation plan? We included a management and coordination framework, we established coordination and monitoring mechanisms, and we agreed on the methodology for implementation. The most important aspects, again, so 4, 5, 6, 7, we defined targets, milestones and indicators, we made a detailed and realistic cost estimation, prioritized projects, and we suggested also to start always with projects with a high potential to create credibility in your society. Conclusions to close. The PRA is, as I said before, vital for testing the methodology of repair, was vital. The development goal should be as close as possible to the strength and specifics of the location. To give you an example, in Paola, for example, they had already some focus being developed on sport activities in these barracks, and to focus, let's say, the development on that. And they enlarged it. They went forward on that. And they did decide to create something completely new, because that's very difficult. Projects with a wide integrated development goal, they have better chances for funding, which indeed was the case when we discussed it with the managing authorities, and which was also confirmed this morning by our guest from the ministry in Romania. And this was well done in Paola. The Florence focus, and this is what we also stated in our implementation plan, could be wider because it was a strong focus on socio-economic issues, and there is potential also to include energy issues as well in this plan. MA involvement is crucial in an early phase of development of the lab to have the best guarantee of future funding. And the fifth one, link the lab directly to wider local regional planning and development strategies, which was done successfully in Paola from the very beginning. And the potential for further development in Florence is, our conclusion, could be increased if this approach was taken from the, let's say, very, very beginning. This is the end of my presentation on the pilot regeneration actions. And we come back in the top 10 tips with some other tips which are linked to the PRA, so I don't have to explain that now, I guess. So thank you for your attention.